During the Second World War, the alliance between the United States and Great Britain was pitched to the public as a unified band of brothers marching toward a common victory. But inside the Allied High Command, it was a boiling cauldron of national pride, strategic disagreements, and monumental egos. The British military, having fought the Axis alone for years, viewed the newly arrived Americans as inexperienced, reckless amateurs. The Americans, in turn, viewed the British as overly cautious, obsessed with status, and maddeningly slow. At the absolute center of this explosive cultural clash were two men: Britain's methodical hero, General Bernard Law Montgomery, and America's flamboyant, blood-and-guts cavalryman, General George S. Patton. Montgomery believed in stage-managed, carefully planned set-piece battles. Patton believed in relentless, violent, blinding speed. In July 1943, during the Allied invasion of Sicily, codenamed Operation Husky, these two opposing forces finally collided. The strategic plan for the invasion of Sicily was designed by British General Sir Harold Alexander. To Patton's absolute disgust, the plan heavily favored Montgomery's British Eighth Army. Montgomery was given the primary objective: a direct drive up the eastern coast to capture the vital port city of Messina, trapping the Axis forces. Patton's American Seventh Army was relegated to a purely supporting role. His job was to land on the southern beaches and form a defensive shield to protect Montgomery's left flank, while the British took the glory. For a commander like Patton, being ordered to sit still and watch someone else fight was a physical torment. As Montgomery's forces bogged down in the rugged terrain and fierce German resistance around Mount Etna, Patton grew increasingly restless. His tanks were idling, his men were eager, and he saw a wide-open opportunity to the west. Patton decided that if the British wouldn't give him a war to fight, he would go find one himself. Patton formed a daring, unauthorized plan. He would break out of his defensive posture, launch a lightning strike across the island, and capture the historic Sicilian capital of Palermo in the northwest. It had little strategic value to the overall campaign, but the psychological and political value of taking a major city would be massive. Patton pushed his armored columns forward at a blistering pace, covering ground so fast that his own supply lines struggled to keep up. Yet when General Sir Harold Alexander realized what his rogue American general was doing, he was furious. This was not the plan. Patton was exposing the lines and stealing the spotlight. Alexander immediately dispatched an urgent radio message to Patton's headquarters. The order was explicit and absolute. Patton was to halt his advance on Palermo immediately, hold his position, and return to protecting Montgomery's flank. What happened next cemented Patton's legacy as a brilliant, insubordinate maverick. When the radio operator received Alexander's direct order to halt, he handed the transcript to Patton. Patton read the message, fully understanding that defying a direct order from the theater commander was grounds for a court-martial. But Palermo was practically in his sights. Instead of ordering his tanks to stop, Patton turned to his communications officer. He ordered them to reply to British High Command with a simple response. The transmission had been garbled in transit, and they needed Alexander to resend the message. Patton then allegedly told his staff to shut down the radios. By the time General Alexander's headquarters realized they were being played and retransmitted the order, it was too late. Patton's forces had already smashed through the Italian defenses and driven triumphantly into the streets of Palermo. When the clarified message finally arrived ordering him to halt, Patton cheekily replied that he had already taken the city. Should he give it back? Taking Palermo was a massive PR victory for the Americans, but Patton wasn't finished. Now operating entirely on his own initiative, he pivoted his Seventh Army eastward. But he decided he wasn't just going to outshine Montgomery, he was going to beat him to his own objective, What followed was the legendary race to Messina. While Montgomery continued his slow, methodical grind against heavy German defenses, Patton drove his men relentlessly along the northern coastal road. When the Germans blew up bridges to stop him, Patton launched daring, impromptu amphibious leapfrog operations, landing troops behind the German lines to break the stalemates. He pushed his men to the point of exhaustion, famously remarking that sweat saves blood and blood saves lives. On August 17, 1943, American troops rolled into Messina. Patton had won the race. A few hours later, the lead elements of Montgomery's British 8th Army, complete with a bagpipe band, marched into the city, fully expecting to be the liberators. But instead, they found General George S. Patton standing in the town square, grinning from ear to ear, waiting to welcome them to a city he had already conquered. The British High Command was apoplectic. Patton had ignored strategy, defied direct orders, and humiliated their top commander. But the results were undeniable. Patton had captured tens of thousands of prisoners, secured the island faster than anyone thought possible, and proven to the world that the American army was no longer a junior partner. When a British general tried to put a leash on him, Patton proved that a commander with a relentless will to attack cannot be managed from a desk. He didn't just break the rules, he rewrote them in real time. It was a terrifying preview for the German High Command of what was coming to Europe, an American war machine led by a man who respected speed, violence, and victory above all else, even above the orders of his own allies.